I wanted us to sing that song just before the lesson. It was written a couple of hundred years ago. D.L. Moody was preaching a message in Chicago, and it was kind of during a revival, and many people were there. One of his song leaders was the one who wrote this, Philip Bliss. But during that lesson, D.L. Moody gave the illustration or the story of an event that happened on Lake Erie at the harbor at Cleveland, Ohio, of a ship that was coming in during a violent storm, and really that was the only hope that they had, if they could get into the harbor where they could find safety. And it was very difficult to see, and of course, a long time before navigation, all the electronics and all the ability to guide and to see, but they depended on the lighthouse. Well, the lighthouse was all right, but also along the sides of the canal, they would have little lamps so that the ship would be able to tell where it was going. And so the captain of the ship asked the pilot, "Do you see the lamps?" He says, "No, they must have gone out." He said, "Well, do you think we'll make it?" And he said, "I think we can." But they didn't. They didn't make it. They ended up hitting the rocks. Ship sank. Many people died. And D.L. Moody summed it up by saying, "What is our role as being the people of God?" And he said, "The master will take care of the great lighthouse, but it is up to us to keep the lower lamps burning." And that's kind of the illustration we find in the Word of God, that we are also to be a light of the world. We are to be shining for God, to be able to direct people to God so that people can see God living in us, and through that they can maybe be able to see their way a little bit better, that they may be able to get into a harbor where there's safety, where we would maybe use a bigger word than safety, there's salvation, where people can live, people can survive even the most difficult storms of life, and people will even be able to survive through the final judgment because of Christ. And we know Jesus said he was the light of the world. He's a light that shines in darkness, but many people in the darkness do not accept it. They do not comprehend it. They do not want the light, and so they go the other way to continue living in darkness. In the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, there it says God created the world. God created the lights. It says he created a great light for the day, which we would know would be the sun. But then he created a light for the night. And then it goes on to say, and he created the stars. So what is this secondary light he created for the night time and the darkness? I'm thinking we would say it's the moon, because it's not the stars, because he said, and he created the stars. The stars were different. The stars something else. But he did create the stars, but the secondary light is the moon. Well, how much light does the moon produce? None. It doesn't produce light. It reflects light. It's able to take the light from the sun and shine it, reflect it, mirror it, so that we can even have light in the darkness. And maybe we're supposed to be more like the moon. We're not a light of ourselves. We are to reflect Christ living in us so that people will be able to see. And so I want to talk about this kind of in tandem with what our theme is. And, you know, if you can't tell already, we did get some new banners as well. And so we've got the lighthouse theme of, reaching out. And the idea is that, we do need to take a stand. We need to be the people that this world needs in order to know truth, to know life, to have relationship with God. And so the theme for this year, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. The theme is to be bold and courageous for Christ, to take a stand, to be strong, to be diligent, to persevere, and kind of along with the introduction so far, to allow our lower lights to be burning so that people can see Christ. So the verse kind of ties in two themes. Because 2 weeks ago, we had the congregational meeting. We talked about being bold and courageous for Christ. But the verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13 and 14 says, be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, and do everything in love. So last week, you remember Valentine's Day, we talked about love. And so even in this, there's got to be a balance. That we would not be so strong and forceful and dogmatic and we come across like we are irritated, that we're mean, that we are judgmental, that we are intolerant, that we are angry. It can happen sometimes. Paul is really writing a corrective, isn't he? I mean, we remember the book of 1 Corinthians. I mean, this is a fantastic verse. I mean, it's almost one of the most encouraging verses in the whole book of Corinthians. Like, they were a church with a lot of problems. And we would say, he's at the very end now, the last chapter, maybe he's summing it all up. This is what you need to do. Everything we've talked about earlier, all the struggles, problems, and many of them are things that they've caused amongst themselves, things that they've done, things that they've believed, attitudes that they've had, immoral lifestyles, false doctrine, divisions. I mean, the list goes on and on. But maybe he sums it up by saying, you got to be strong. You got to be on your guard. You got to be able to stand. But you remember, we would say, chapter 13, right? Chapter of love. Got to remember love. So we've got to have that balance, we would say, to know how to stand, how to speak, how to teach the truth. That what is right doesn't all of a sudden become self-righteous. It actually comes out like, I need to tell you something because I care about you, because I love you. Because I'm concerned. I'm not doing this so I can make my own stand and so I can look good and I can think that I'm better than others. No, I'm doing this because I care. And I think that kind of comes across in good parenting. I know you can say parenting, but there's bad parenting, but good parenting. So what do good parents do? Well, they don't just ignore everything their children do. You try to train, you correct, you teach. But do you have to ever discipline? Anybody here ever had to discipline their children, or is it just me, right? Yeah, we've got to do some discipline. But why? Why do we discipline? For the child's good, for their welfare, for their benefit, so that both now and then into the future, they can become a better person. So yes, even sometimes the correction and discipline, it seems kind of negative, but even that needs to be done in love, because we truly care for the welfare, for the health, for the blessings that are available for children. And that's the way it should be for us as we stand for Christ and as we live for him. And so this was the lesson, just in case you're wondering, how did you come up with the lesson? I kind of thought, well, if I called it Deer Stand, then maybe some guys would pay attention, because that's maybe, it's better than saying, love in the kitchen, baking chocolate chip cookies. Maybe guys don't really do that, but they like eating them, but it just doesn't connect so much. But so the idea is that we can take a stand, but we have to do it kind of dearly, like we treat people like they're a deer, not deer hunting, because that'd be really, I treat you like I'm out there hunting you down. No, it's not that kind of a deer hunt, but it's tender, it's compassionate, it's loving. So that's the idea of this kind of a stand. We would say, and some of it may follow along with the idea of hunting, doesn't it? Do you know that if you're hunting, you need to be alert? Because I don't know about you, but I know for me, I've never been hunting before, but I know what I can do if I'm sitting still very long with not a whole lot to do. I'm either going to go to daydreaming or I'm going to go to night dreaming. Probably the second more than anything else. I mean, I would literally be there asleep, right? Probably not going to shoot too many deer sleeping because I'm not going to see them and I will be snoring so loudly. It's not going to work. So I've got to be alert. I've got to be prepared. But then I also have to be thinking, maybe like the deer, how can I track them maybe closer? How can I do things that, at least when I do see them, now I have an opportunity. So again, as Christians, we're not out hunting anybody, but we're thinking about how we can be prepared, be on the ready, so that we can influence people, so we can help people not to die, but to have life. And so that's the idea as we just look at a few scriptures that may help us just previous to chapter 16 and 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. So very similar language that he talks about chapter 16. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. So again, it's this idea, very similar to what we just read in chapter 16, that we're eager to do what is right, to be involved, to be engaged, to know what we believe, and to be able to live that way. Again, it's not just something we teach once in a while. It's not just things that come out of our mouth, but it's in our hearts. It's what we live. It's what we're faithful to. And therefore, what is inside comes out naturally in our actions and in our words. So we're willing to take this stand and to live for Christ. But that's where I do like also the verse in Ephesians chapter 4, because it talks about, a little bit earlier before this, it talks about speaking the truth in love, that kind of idea that we're willing to take a stand, but we're going to also be very careful about our attitude. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. Unwholesome talk. In the context, I don't know if he's talking about just like swearing cuss words. Maybe he's not even just talking about lying or gossip. Maybe he's just talking about unwholesome talk. What would be the opposite? Well, could we say, this is what you need to do. Let the wholesome talk come out of your mouth. Well, what would wholesome? Wholesome talk would be talk that helps people to be whole, right? So, like in other words, we can say, well, I don't talk about really bad things. I just never really talk about anything that's important, right? So I just sit around all the time and, I can talk about the weather and I can talk about my job and I can talk about, sports and, I'm not saying those things are not important at all, but they're just not important. I mean, does it change anybody's life? Somebody like, boy, whenever I talk about sports, it just makes me a better person. Well, generally not. It doesn't really make you better. So it's not helping people to be whole. Well, what kind of things would we talk about to people so that they could be whole? Well, that would be things that are true and honorable and right and just. Maybe sharing faith and hope and future and, and sometimes it even comes out negatively. We say, hey, even in the future, there's going to be a judgment, right? So, hey, let's if we're be prepared for that. How would we do that? And so we're helping people to be healthy, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, relationally. We want people to be whole. So what do we want? We want wholesome words. And again, so it's not saying you can never talk about the weather, sports, or work. It's not saying never, but why don't we think about how we can build people up? And that's what the next part is. That's why I think the wholesome has to do with this next part. Only what is building up. This is what we would speak about. The things that help people be better, to be stronger. So build people up. Now the next challenge is we have to know them. We have to be in a relationship with them because we have to know what their needs are. And that includes, people that are discouraged. That includes people that, have a lot of fear in their life. They have a lot of questions. Maybe they have doubts. But how would you know any of those things unless you actually talk to people? And usually that would not come out just in casual conversation, would it? Generally, you have to really get to know people and say, hey, what's really bothering you? What's going on? It seems like you're really struggling. It seems like you're down. Can we talk about it? And because that says according to their needs. How do we know what their needs are? Except in relationship. So we know where they're at. So this would include somebody that's in the church, but it may also include non-believers. I wonder why they don't believe. What is it that's really stopping them from coming to faith? What is it that maybe they've been taught or something they're feeling that is the roadblock? If we could find out what that is, maybe we can encourage them according to their need of what they're struggling with. And then there'd be great benefit. It would be beneficial to them. It would be beneficial for us as we get to know people where we can encourage them. And a lot of times when we encourage other people, they find out things about us. And sometimes they end up encouraging us, right? And we've done that a lot, I think, individually and maybe even collectively, where we think we're going out to help someone else or encourage someone else or to teach someone else. And we come away feeling better, stronger, smarter, more educated, stronger faith. We've grown through the process as well. So it's a blessing for us. That's not necessarily our initial intent or motivation, but it's kind of the byproduct that we also are blessed when we're trying to give them a blessing. So as these things come together and we think about what is our role, what's our responsibility. So Philippians chapter 2 and verse 15, it says, then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. And so, again, here he's saying, don't let those, angry, bitter, negative, false words be coming out of your mouth. But, live a righteous life. Live a godly life. And then you shine like stars in the sky. So people see it. They recognize it. Now, sometimes people don't always respond, do they? And I'm sure we know what it's like to be out somewhere where there's no electricity and maybe you don't have a fire or oil lamps or anything, and it's very dark. And sometimes there can be stars in the sky, but they don't help very much because it's cloudy, right? So we don't get the light. So some people, we would say have to have the fog lifted off. They've just kind of got a lot of things cluttered in their brain, and maybe they've got beliefs or feelings that are stopping them from seeing the truth. But, we continue to encourage, we continue to pray that they may understand what God would have them to do. But we shine like stars. That's our responsibility. And that's the thing that will encourage us if we know what our purpose is. Our purpose is to be a light or to reflect the light of Christ in our life. That's our purpose. Our responsibility is not to bring people into the light. That's God's responsibility. Now, we try to help people to see the light. We try to teach people. But for them to respond, that's God's working. That's the Holy Spirit working. That's the Word working. And so we are holding out the Word. We are shining, providing light. You remember, again, in John chapter 3 and chapter 4, Jesus is the light. But it says, men love the darkness. And you know what Jesus did with people that loved the darkness? He got just so mad at them, and he went and he just grabbed them and he dragged them into the light and said, you're going to be living in the light whether you want to or not. Just sit there and be quiet. Remember that? No, he didn't do that. He really just said, they love the darkness. They've gone that way. That's the decision they've made. That's the direction they're going. And Jesus wasn't going to force them or make them do anything. Why did Jesus come? He came to shine light for people that want to walk in light, for people that want to be able to see where they're going, for people that want to understand what their purpose is, so people can see God and even see how they can get back to God when they've realized, here I am, I'm just walking in darkness. I mean, we've all been walking in darkness, right? In our past. Until we came into the light, we were in the darkness. That's our responsibility. That's our job, is to shine for Christ. And people, free will, their choice, decide. And if they decide not to follow Christ, that's their decision. We don't have to bear a responsibility. We don't need to carry guilt that somehow people have made a choice that we're not happy with. That'll happen. But that's their choice. We just don't give up. And I think that's the key. And over again, it seems like in the New Testament it says, don't give up in doing good works, right? It's sometimes going to be hard. It's going to feel difficult. Sometimes you're going to get tired. Sometimes you're going to say, what's the point? It doesn't seem to be working. Don't give up. Just live faithfully. That's all you've been called to do. And whether many people respond in a positive way and come to the light, or few, what if none? Well, we don't give up. We just say, I'm going to continue to live a faithful life for Christ. And so we want to hold out the word of life so people have that opportunity. So be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous and be strong. But don't forget, right, to do everything in love. And I think when we have, what we say, the right balance and the right combination of these things, we will be able to be bold and to be strong for Christ, but we'll also be able to continue to build relationships with people and to love people, to be able to respond to their needs, be able to speak words based on where they're at, to be able to encourage them and help them as they grow in Christ. We're going to sing a song, Out of My Bondage, and this is why Christ came, that we could be free. And not only was it his teaching and his life, but it was also his death and his resurrection. And through that, we have relationship with Christ. And so, as always, we give an opportunity for people to respond if we can be a blessing to you. If today you want to become a child of God and be baptized into Christ, put your faith fully in him and to commit to loving and serving him all the days of your life. If we can encourage you, Ken's going to come up, lead us in this song.